So welcome back, everyone. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope you get some great value out of our newsletters if you're not already subscribed. In the first video, if you recall, we talked about situations and five-room dungeons and how they can help you improvise and create better adventures that are faster and easier to manage and create. And so that was pretty good. And Mike blew my mind with some five-room dungeons meet story beats. So that's fantastic. And so in this video today, we're going to look at physical dungeon design. And so this is going to look at particular dungeon designs through the lens of the Lazy Dungeon Master and five-room dungeons. And we'll look at a bunch of popular design patterns for dungeons. And that's through Jaquaying. Did I say that right?
Jaquaying. Yep. Jaquaying the Dungeon. Yep.
The Dungeon. Thanks.
As coined by Justin Alexander. Yeah, on the Alexandria blog.
All right, so the goals of this video, we're going to answer a bunch of questions for you in this video to show you how to basically build fantastic dungeons. And so those are how to determine a good map from a bad map, how to find and change a map to fit your game, why you shouldn't always draw your own maps. That'll be an interesting one. I look forward to hearing what you have to say there. I like drawing maps, but I would like to draw. Time is of essence sometimes. And then what are critical features your map needs to have for a good dungeon adventure? So those are our goals for the video. Mike, take it away.
Yeah, so I want to talk about finding good maps. I definitely fall on the side of go grab a map rather than draw a map. And I know that's not for everybody. People like drawing maps, and who am I to say take this thing you like and throw it out of the way? But in my drive to try to find the most efficient way to prepare a game, my experience is Dyson from DysonLogos.com is far better at drawing maps than I am. He's got 900 maps available on his website, and that's just one cartographer. And there are many. Daniel Walthall, Elvin Tower, Jared Blando, Christian Zook, all these different cartographers that are out there making maps. When I think about efficiency, I think my time is better spent tailoring that stuff towards my group than it is me recreating stuff they've already done. So yeah, we live in a tremendous age for being able to find content like this. We have many different websites where you can either buy maps or in many cases use maps legally for free. I find that the approach that I often take is when I think about, we talked in the last video about situation-based design. And when I'm thinking about a situation, I say to myself, like, I need a hobgoblin fort. And rather than sit down and kind of think through all the things that I need for a hobgoblin fort, I will go to the Dyson Logos website where all 900 maps are in one big page, and I'll just start scrolling. And I'll scroll until I'm like, there's the map I need, or that's good enough, right? Good enough is a big thing for the Lazy Dungeon Master. And I will grab that map and download it, and then I will decide like what's in that map. What are the rooms? What are the room assignments? What's going on where? And I'll do it from that map that already exists. Part of what we need to do, I think, is understand what makes a good map, what makes a good map and a bad map. I played an adventure, one of the adventures from Ghosts of Saltmarsh, the published hardcover adventure, Ghosts of Saltmarsh. I ran it, and when I ran it, the game really didn't go well. And I was really interested. I don't beat myself up when games don't go bad. I try to take it as a learning experience and go, I wonder why that went so bad. And I kind of thought about it. I said, I don't know. I wonder what's this. And then I ran the same adventure for my other group, and they hated it too. And at that point, I was like, this adventure isn't great, right? And in particular, the map wasn't great. And an example was there is one entrance into this area. There's the big map for the adventure has one entrance that comes in. You come in the first room, and there's a bunch of dudes in the first room. And there are 10 rooms adjacent to that one room with one door in between each of them. So it's like all the quarters. And they all have occupants as well. So the question is, when you attack those first guys, why don't all the doors open up? And now you have 11 encounters in one room. And there's only one exit. There's only the one way in, and you're not going to sneak in, right? And there's only one way out to get to the rest of the main thing. You have to go through one of those rooms. And it took me I've been playing D&D a long time, and I only ran this a couple years ago. And it took me to go, wow, that's a really bad map, right? Like the design of that doesn't really work with good storytelling. So what does a good map look like? And in studying this idea, I ran across a blog article by Justin Alexander, who we mentioned before, runs a blog called The Alexandrian. And he has an article called Jaquaying the Dungeon. The term Jaquaying comes from Janelle Jaquay, who was a cartographer back in the old days of D&D, now works on video games and electronic games, and designed a lot of maps for competitive adventures and adventures that was done by, I think, by TSR and a whole bunch of different companies. Janelle Jaquay has a particular style to her maps that Justin Alexander dissects into pieces to say what makes a good map. Really, the high-level pieces, a good map has lots of opportunities for interesting choices to be made and for interesting discoveries. If a map is too symmetrical, if you have, if we were going to take the 5-room dungeon and make it as linear as possible, that's not the most interesting dungeon design, because it's one room and then a hallway and then one room and a hallway and one room and a hallway, right? And that's obviously not how the 5-room dungeon works, but as an example. So too symmetrical and it's boring. Too few choices and you're just going from one room to another. And when I ran 4E D&D for a long time, that was pretty much how I ran the games, because I knew I only have so many encounters I could fit into a session. The only way I can ensure I get to all those encounters is that there's one hallway leading to each group. The idea of a Jaquay-style dungeon has a few criteria, and I'm boiling them down to 4. There's a whole bunch, and a lot of it has to do with multi-level dungeons, but we're just going to stick to single-level affairs for our conversation today. 4 criteria that Justin Alexander sort of pulls out of Jaquay-style dungeons and talks about in his blog article are multiple entrances, right? Are there multiple ways to get into this place? Multiple paths, right? As I'm going through the dungeon, are there different paths I can take to get from place to place? Loopbacks, which is, can I go through one path and then find that there's a path that takes me back where I came from, right? And that's like an interesting discovery. It's this moment of like, I'm starting to understand how this dungeon works. Having secret rooms and secret paths. Are there shortcuts? Are there interesting ways to get past things? Are there secret doors that you open up into other chambers? But basically ensuring that there's more discovery, more ways to kind of get around in a particular dungeon. All of those are really designed to offer interesting choices and interesting moments of discovery for players when they're playing this game. Understanding what makes a good map. Like, one nice thing is Dyson Logos, who I mentioned before. Dyson understands the idea of a Jaquay-style map. If you look at Dyson's maps, most of them, probably not all of them, but most of them have these sorts of things built in. They have secret rooms, they have loopbacks, they have multiple entrances, they have multiple paths, they have all sorts of different ways. So once you start to internalize what makes a good dungeon from a gameplay perspective, and once you internalize that, now when you're going and sorting through maps, you can easily say, like, that map's probably not going to be much fun. That map is. So it's a useful model to keep in one's head. So then the next question is, how does the 5-room dungeon design pattern fit on these style maps? And are there alternatives to just going out and seeking maps that exist online?
And I like what you had to say there, because that's a fantastic example. So let's say a game master does not want to run a railroad adventure. They want the players to have freedom of choice, and then you play to find out what happens next. But if your map, like you said, is a linear sequence of encounters, then you've kind of already committed to that thing that you didn't want to do in the first place. You've kind of screwed yourself over. So that's really interesting how the map is almost like the foundation of your opportunities of a game master to run a flexible adventure, to giving players agency and choice. So that's really good insight there. And so with 5-room dungeons, they're a standalone story. So from beginning to middle to end, from the characters having a goal, and then there's a big conflict, and there's a path to victory and defeat. They allow you to leverage maps with all of the Jaquaying features and help you improvise and giving you that safety net. So if you're worried about having too many entrances and then not being able to control the challenge ratings or the resource depletion of the party or whatnot, then you can overlay the 5-room dungeon onto that and then execute whatever it is your kind of meta goal is while you're GMing. That it is a fantastic model for allowing you to do that. We can use the certain features, all features of 5-room dungeons to help you Jaquay your maps, or to facilitate you GMing a Jaquayed map, turning a person into a verb there. So I have some examples here, 3 quick examples. So factions are really interesting to me because they are situations. I think of, like we talked in the first video about situations, and factions themselves are situations. So you can then therefore turn a faction into a 5-room dungeon. There's meeting the faction all the way to the end, which is the result of your interaction with the faction. That could occur over one encounter or multiple encounters. But with multiple entrances, it means you could actually hit a variety of different factions if you structure your situations like that. So this faction is over here, that faction is over there. And a classic example is Keep on the Borderlands, B2, in the old days, where you had the Caves of Chaos there with the different factions or the different tribes of humanoids, and the players chose which cave to explore first. And so, yeah, factions help you facilitate basically improvisational play by giving players choice, but still giving you certainty about who the factions are and their goals and whatnot. And then if you run factions like 5-room dungeons, then you've got the double win there. Another example is what I call spikes of danger. And so this is inspired from Ben Robbins. He ran a campaign called Westmarches, and that has become a really viral or a famous model of running improvised games where the players, you just lay out a map, say a Jaquaying map, and let the players choose their approach and their entrances or whatever it is that they're going to do. And so he called them in his on his blog where he described how to create a Westmarches type of campaign. He calls them danger gradients. And so when I read that, a light bulb went off, and I thought, okay, it's just like rings in a dartboard. And so if you have your main goal of that, of whatever it is, it's like of your situation or of a piece of the situation, like a Lego piece or a faction within a situation, that bullseye is where your main conflict is. That's your room 4. And so the players want to head towards that because that's where the treasure is going to be and the reward as well. The thing is, then you can have each room be a further ring, an outer ring of that dartboard. And rings don't have one entrance. I don't know if this visual is working for you or not, but the players can approach the ring from any side, and then they can go inside that ring, and then they have their choice of path, and they hit the next ring. But the rings are sequential. So there's an outer ring, and then so on, you get to the bullseye. And so those rings, if they become the rooms of your 5-room dungeon, or they become the beats of your story, then you can improvise and layer those onto a map that facilitates players choosing their own adventure. So that's a really effective method for being improvised but confident and letting players do their own thing.
Yeah, that reminds me of in Dungeon World, and I think Apocalypse World has this. The Powered by the Apocalypse games has this concept of fronts, right? So you can almost think of like the center of the dartboard as your front, right? So you might have the Dragon Lord, the Red Dragon Lord is one front, and the Ice Queen is the other front, and then a third front, right? And those are the centers of your gradients. Those are the center of your danger gradients. And if you go outward, like the outermost ring are kobolds who are, loyal to the Red Dragon Lord doing kobold stuff, right? And as you get deeper into those rings, it gets more dangerous. You have to be more powerful until you get to the Dragon Lord. But then there could be 3 of those. And if you're going through the front model, they're moving, right? They're doing things. The Dragon Lord has a plan, right? The Dragon Lord has a goal, and it has steps that it's taking. And those steps could be increasing the longer they are left. That's not exactly a Westmarches style, because in Westmarches style, they don't, the players are choosing what's going on, and usually those elements are static. They're not going to grow on their own. But if you want to add some life to it, you might say like the Dragon Lord's getting more powerful, right? Like you look west and the sky is blood red, right, and getting darker as their dark ritual is getting further along. So it seems like those 2 ideas might be able to overlap as well, the danger gradients and the idea of Dungeon World style fronts. Yeah,
excellent. So I guess you would call room 1 of the 5-room dungeon the front door. Anyway, so I'm glad you brought that up, because in Westmarches, which is Sandbox, the players will, let's say they start out at first level. The characters start out first level. You don't want the characters to suddenly confront the dragon. Because they'll just be wiped out. There's such a power imbalance. And so Ben uses the danger gradients to signal to the players when they're approaching danger. So they encounter the front door as the first one, those kobolds, and then they choose what they want to do there. And then they know that as they go beyond the kobolds, it'll be slightly more dangerous, and then more dangerous the third ring, and finally you approach the great danger. So there's clear signaling there, done, I think, in a really good storytelling way, that the characters are slowly entering greater and greater threatening territory, more threatening territory. The final one is Fractal. Dave Chalker has created a method called the 5x5 adventure structure. I think it is 5x5 method.
Yeah, the 5x5 method. Yep.
Yeah. And that is powerful, right? You get 25 encounters, but it is really, once you kind of latch onto it, it becomes very easy to start creating the structure of your adventure and then fleshing the details out versus a blank piece of paper with numbers 1 to 25. And you try to figure out what each of those is. So it's really effective. And so with 5-room dungeons, you can, and I'm not focused on the 5, that is a recurring theme, but that is not the point here. The point is that each room could be its own 5-room dungeon. It's fractal in that way. And then, if you wanted, I know some of the feedback I received from subscribers by email saying, yeah, and then within the first room there'll be another 5, and you can go as deep as your mind can handle. Mine
Sure.
can only do 2 levels. So I like the 5x5 method meets the 5-room dungeon. So in that outer ring, for example, if you want to combine with spikes of danger, the players have a map that allows them to enter that outer ring from multiple areas, or a second ring through multiple passageways or whatnot. You can then have 5 encounters within that outer ring. But those 5 encounters are not purely random, because you then get to overlay the 5-room dungeon and you have that story structure. So then there's a story to be told within that ring itself. And so that means the players are constantly, you are collaborating with your players to constantly create stories. It is not just a sequence of independent adventure encounters or conflicts. So that's really powerful. And then in addition, so you can take your map and you can subdivide it, and you can leverage the secret rooms and the different sections, and those could become your 5x5. It's hard to, I think, explain without a map to show you, but when you break 5-room dungeons out into further gameplay, not just one encounter, you're done the next, and then it's the next encounter, you can actually take some time, slow the pacing down, celebrate that one section of your adventure, the Jaquaying map, and then tell some stories around just that section, and then move on to the next section. And I propose that a really effective approach is to use the 5-room dungeon model, the story model, and apply that into the different sections of your Jaquaying map.
Throughout this video, we looked at a bunch of different things. We've looked at physical dungeon design, how to identify good maps from bad. It's probably a little subjective. We're probably I like my linear dungeons. Okay, cool. Go with the gods, right?
Yeah, exactly. You do you.
Yeah, you do you. We're good. But but here are some models to look for maps to try to find the ones that offer the most choice and interesting discoveries and things like that. So hopefully this gave you that idea. We talked about whether or not you should draw a map, or whether you should go find one available on the internet. Again, you do you. Overall, what are going to make your maps and your adventures more fun as you think about how the characters can approach it from all kinds of different angles. So in our next video, which is going to be available by joining, if you are either a patron already, or if you join the Sly Flourish Patreon, you'll be able to see the next video, in which we're going to talk about running heists and capers. So the link to join the Patreon will be down below. And then our 4th video is going to be on mysteries. And you can get this video by joining John 4's Patreon at patreon.com/John4. So thank you very much, and have a great day.